Cool. Welcome, everyone. This is our 5ME Oh My God panel. Want to start off, I really wanted to thank the camp for hosting us. The old Palenque Norte videos, or the Palenque videos, I guess I should say, were really inspiring to me way back in the day, so sitting up here is a little bizarre and super awesome. I have an incredible group of people. I wanted to just read bios really quickly. I'll get through them quickly so we can get to the talk, but I want you all to appreciate how awesome this group of people is. So we have Ashley, who was on this last one as well. These are totally out of order, but we're going to do them out of order. So we have Ashley, who was an oceanographer at Stanford, UCLA, and has now switched gears as a direct result of a 5-MeO DMT experience to dedicated herself to legitimizing psychedelics as medicine. So 3.5 years ago, she founded in LA the AWARE Project, which is a co-founder of Interspace Integration, and also worked for a year and a half at the Crossroads Treatment Center in Mexico as a psychospiritual retreat leader with Ibogaine and 5-MeO DMT before it was closed down in 2017. Currently earning her second master's degree. I guess oceanography is not super pertinent to psychedelic research. And works as the study coordinator for the MAP-sponsored clinical trial of MDMA-assisted psychotherapy for the treatment of PTSD, and is on her way to being one of the first legal psychedelic therapists. Yeah. We also have Sebastian Jobe. I got the name right? Yes, excellent. He's an honorary associate in the Department of Anthropology at the University of Sydney and a visiting lecturer at the National Institute of Dramatic Art, where for the past 5 years he's taught in the Writing Master's Program with an emphasis on politics, philosophy, and psychoanalysis. His PhD analyzed the motivations of Russian racist nationalists. Oh, and he also conducted research with the Aztec revivalist Danzantes in Mexico City. His focus in recent years is centered on the ethnographic use of psychoactive substances, both in Australia and Latin America, with a particular interest in the environmental, political, and philosophical significance of the cultures of these that use these substances. Well, that was a mouthful. All right. Thank you. We also have Raphael, who's the founder and administrator of 5meodmt.org. You might have heard people talk about it as the Five Hive, and a graduate of the University of Wyoming with a master's in mental health counseling. He's also a therapist with a cannabis and ketamine-assisted therapy clinic in Lakewood, Colorado, just down the street from me, which is super exciting. And he's the publisher on tons of papers looking at the therapeutic and healing potential of 5-MeO DMT. Well, let's stop at the end. James Oroc, always the best dressed dude on every panel, no matter how hard I try. He's the author of Tryptamine Palace, which was the first book published about 5-MeO DMT. I highly recommend it. The subtitle is From Burning Man to the Akashic Field. Did I get that correctly? And The New Psychedelic Revolution, one of the leading ethnographic philosophers of his generation. Really great. We also have the Teafaerie. Yay! Teafaerie writes stories, poems, movies, plays, and essays, makes videos, organizes flash mobs, and is a frequent writer for Erowid. I'm sure at least some of you are in here because of her poem Mapping the Source. Yeah. She's the author of that poem, and if you haven't watched it, as soon as you get internet, I fully recommend you go do so. My name is Mitchell Gomez. I'm the executive director of DanceSafe, which is a public health nonprofit. We do a lot of things. One of the things we do is on-site reagent drug testing, where people bring us their substances, we chemically analyze them, and then provide harm reduction messaging. And we're going to be releasing a 5-MeO DMT card in large part because I'm starting to overhear conversations about it. I feel like it's DMT circa 99. From like 95 to 99, every time I talk to somebody about DMT, they had no idea what I was talking about, and then started to change. And I think we're reaching that point with 5, and so I think it's an important conversation to have, because if people think it's another type of DMT and they treat it that way, we're going to have some real problems. Real problems, so we'll leave it at that. For anyone who isn't aware, I just want to start off, 5-MeO DMT is a psychedelic tryptamine found in a wide variety of plant species and a single psychoactive toad species, the Colorado river toad, the only known psychoactive amphibian. It was first synthesized in 1936, and it's been used in ritualistic stuffs in Central and South America for thousands of years. The use of the toad venom in ancient Mesoamerican cultures is a hotly debated subject, one I don't want to get too deeply into in this conversation, one that I personally believe in. I don't know how long that use persisted, but having seen the carved stone Mixtec toads in Mexico City with their clearly marked parotidal glands, I'm pretty convinced. But that's a different conversation, and a random fentanyl test strip in my notes. It is illegal in the United States as of January 2011, placed into Schedule 1, joining a long list of drugs that don't belong there. Its use continues to rise throughout the world in both religious and recreational contexts. The reason I wanted to organize this conversation, and I really do want it to be a conversation, please don't feel like you need to wait till the end. I always say this at talks. If you have something you'd like to say, if you have a question you'd like to ask, this is it's a large conversation, but it needs to be a dialogue. One of the reasons I wanted to do this is I was recently in Mexico and had a full breakthrough dose of toad for the first time. I tried synthetic 5 at lower doses, but this was my first experience. And one that I found personally quite earth-shattering in the truest sense of that word. I came out of the experience doubting a lot of things that I've always deeply, deeply believed to be true. And I still do believe some of those are true. The main one being that I believe drugs work by triggering certain neural receptors in our brains, that we are physical beings, our thoughts arise from our neural architecture, and drugs work by interacting with those receptors. And I believed that through many, many drug experiences. 5 shook my belief in that in a way that no other drug has, and it's really hard to get me not to be a skeptic. I am fundamentally a skeptic about everything. And so any drug that can make me be a little less skeptical just impresses the hell out of me. And so that was part of my motivation for organizing this talk. And so I really thank you all so much for joining me for this. I really appreciate it. And do we have enough? How many microphones do we have here? So I'm going to say something and then immediately hand the microphone down. And whoever wants to talk. This is very unstructured. I'm a big fan of efficiency, which is the polite word for lazy. So this is not super structured. But yeah, so I think we should start off talking about what this experience is. And I don't want to structure that too much. However you interpret that, however you'd like to talk about that. So what do you think the 5-MeO DMT experience is? And I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on all of that. I know some of your thoughts, but I think everyone here would love to hear. I'm not making any rules here. Talk to
Well, the first thing I'd say about 5-methoxy-DMT experience is that it barely should be categorized as a psychedelic experience. And even as a psychedelic experience, it's entirely different to any other psychedelic experience. Phenomenologically, it truly is utterly unique. Having written the first major book about 5-MeO that I originally gave away at Burning Man because there was zero information out there at all that I could find about it, I've had 10 or 15 years of people writing to me going, oh yeah, but you know, I had this ayahuasca experience, or I had this mushroom experience, and I had this, and you're kind of in this strange position where you don't want to sound like a dick, going, yes, but it's nothing like that. And sure enough, within, they finally try it, and they write back to them and go, oh my God, now I see what you're talking about. It was nothing like those other experiences. So I think that's a really good place to start with the conversation about 5-methoxy-DMT, is how utterly unique it really is.
No. Yeah. So, I've been hard at it for 20 years. Like, on the daily for a minute when I was a psychedelic jackass in my 20s. 44 now. And it's real different. It's real different than in DMT. It's almost unfortunate that they have the same last letters because people will confuse them and they'll say, looks the same from the outside. Somebody takes a puff out of a meth pipe and come back in 15 minutes and says, I can't explain that at all. But on the inside, it's almost completely the opposite. I think of NN as most impressive content, and 5 as most impressive contentless. I think of NN as out like a rocket. I think of 5 as out like a can. But it is not mere unconsciousness, so no, quite the reverse. I'm not qualified to say if it's some state with a Sanskrit name, but you can understand why people might say the things that they do about those states, sort of this inside joke paradoxes. And for my money, it's the center of the target. if I could only do one drug for the rest of my life, that would be the one.
Hello? Oh, yeah. So there's probably a kind of infinite amount of things to say about 5. And on the other hand, I have a strong sense every time that I go there that I've radically forgotten what there was, and that my words are sort of just scratching the belly of some dragon that's flying way, way up in the sky. And I talk myself into the idea that my words are resonant with that. And so you end up with these kind of empty words like that and there. But that coughing behind me, a few things I would say. I think in some ways I experience it as the cessation of all desire and the realization of all desire. Another aspect of that is the sense that you've come to the place of all souls, where all souls have been striving for. And that this is much more than just a wishful fantasy, because the nature of the state is exactly the cessation of all skepticism, the cessation of all doubt, because all doubt, all critical understanding, all theories, etc., they all rely on a little gap between you and what you're thinking about, or what you're imagining, or what you're doubting. Here that gap goes, and what fills it is this gargantuan intensity of understanding, which is so satisfying. It's sort of satisfying beyond any sense of orgasmic satisfaction that you might have previously wished for or considered. That's with a caveat that it may not be like that for you. So, yeah, but one other thing I'd say is, or two other things. I think it's a kind of heart medicine in some fundamental way. It's a heart medicine, and it can teach through being medicinal. It can teach us because it shows us with a kind of radical honesty exactly where we're at and what we fundamentally are. At least, let me just finally say that's how it appears within. So you're in a place where there is no difference between appearance and essence. So there is no, oh, that's how this is appearing. But obviously, subsequently, you get tossed out of the side of the cumulonimbus that you've gone up in your paraglider, and skepticism, doubt may return. I'm not against that at all. I think the task might be to integrate these different modes of thinking and feeling subsequently.
So, one of the things that I found really interesting running the 5 Hive and just reading so many reports is that 5-MeO-DMT raises some of the most deep philosophical questions. Skeptics such as Mitchell can attest that this is a molecule that, after having the experience, people who have held certain constructs in their mind are suddenly faced with the complete uncertainty of what they know or what they believe to be true. And so I think for a molecule that can consistently and reliably produce that state of complete unboundedness and what most people would term non-duality is one of the most fascinating things about this molecule. And I think like what James was saying about this being completely different. It almost is not a psychedelic. And I like how he's said in the past that 5-MeO-DMT could be really considered a true entheogen, manifesting the God within. And I think that for those reasons, it's such a unique experience and ultimately leaves us with the only certainty is that we cannot be certain about anything.
James, can you take it?
I think one of the most beautiful parts of why this molecule was so activating for me personally was it has a way of going straight to the core of your being, and opening to this space of love and what feels like deep truth underneath everything, and being able to have a perspective that is going up to this God's eye view of all that is that's happening here on this realm, whatever this is, and allowing us to be in a state of wonder and gratitude. And I come from both James and Mitchell definitely went through the same sort of journey of being very skeptical, was a very adamant atheist most of my life, to having this complete mystical experience that has changed the entire course of my life in the best possible way. And so I think the beauty of the ineffability of this experience is that no matter how hard we try to explain, paint, do poetry to explain this experience, you're not going to be able to understand it except from within the experience. And so it's a way for not just the spontaneous people in history having spontaneous spiritual experiences, but it democratizes a sense of connection to something bigger than ourselves.
I think it really can be classified as the classical mystical experience. If you take the chemistry out of it, it really is very phenomenologically identical to the mystical experience that mystics have had throughout history. And you certainly can have the same experience on other... This is working, sorry. You can certainly have the same experience on other psychedelics. Historically it has happened, but 5-methoxy is way more likely to do it. The most interesting letter I've ever gotten is from a woman who died in an ambulance in England 16 years ago. She was flat-lying for 45 minutes with renal kidney failure, and she had a near-death experience, a very powerful one, and she couldn't explain it to her friends for 16 years. And then she read Tryptamine Palace, and in it I hypothesized there's a similarity between the 5-methoxy experience and an MDE, but to have someone actually write to me and say that my description was good enough that she could use it to tell her friends what it was dying like. And that the thing that really got her was that I identified it with this force of love, which is the classic mystical answer, and one that for us cynics is pretty hard to stomach from time to time, but it's there.
So I'm looking at my clock and realizing I have way too many questions on this piece of paper, so I'm going to do my best to pick a couple good ones. Well, yeah, it's quite quick. So I think something we should talk about is best practices of facilitators. I think that as this drug becomes more popular, most people don't get handed 5 and told to take it home. That's just not how this drug is being distributed. It's being done through facilitators, through people who are helping people have this experience. So if you had to give one piece of advice for somebody looking for a facilitator, please not using any names. I think either a good piece of advice or something to look for or something to look out for. What do you think somebody should be looking for who's looking for this experience?
I can start. One, as Mitchell said, having a facilitator, especially if this is a new substance for you, I cannot emphasize enough. When people go into this experience and the ego construct evaporates, the somatic response that can come out can be very big, and there can be screaming, crying, thrashing, and one of the roles of a facilitator is to be able to keep the person's body safe while they're journeying. So that's one of the most important things. There's a group of facilitators of 5-MeO-DMT that have come together and created a best practices document and I got access to this. I've posted on the Aware Project webpage, so you can look on the Aware Project webpage to find the entire documents around best practices. And what I would say is, when you're looking for a 5-MeO facilitator or any kind of facilitator to do any kind of substance, is not just what kinds of questions are you asking them about the experience and that kind of thing, but what kind of questions are they asking you? Are they asking you about your medical history, what kinds of pharmaceuticals you might be on, what your family history of mental health history is? Because 5-MeO, just like other substances, can catalyze pre-existing underlying psychological issues and can bring them to the surface. And if there's not a good way to be able to handle that kind of processing, that's going to be a problem, and that can lead to a lot bigger issues that. So I'll start with that, I guess.
Yeah. I have a particularly, it's unusual in the community, but I don't like mixed groups of strangers. And I feel like, sometimes people blow through town and we're going to do 6 or 7 people a night, and it's the people who are here and they don't know each other. And I said, I don't mind them getting paid, right? It is equal to mapping the stars. There's farmers, doctors, nannies, shrinks, masseuses, priests, and whores is getting paid for sacred work. It's okay to charge for yours. Self-righteous snobs who put that down in principle are bores who need to open up their hearts and minds and loosen up their drawers. What's disgusting, sacrilegious, shameful, evil, sick, and wrong is putting profit over people when the medicine's this strong. So you forget and get blasé. Perhaps it's been a bit too long since you yourself has really tried to hit the center of the gong, right? It's such a quintessentially American modality. This done found herself a drive-through enlightenment machine. Step right up, lay right down. All this can be you for the low, low price of all the market will bear. And I get it, because people just want a chance to do it. But you're sitting there silently for 3 or 4 hours watching the people in front of you have maybe a beautiful exorcism scene, but it's scary looking to you, and then you're up, it's now, and then you have to sit there for another 3 hours while the other people go through it. And it's if you're going to roll with this as just drugs, okay, fine, but if you're going to roll with this as something like enlightenment, etc., you're going to have to suck it up and act like you believe it, in which case you've got a couple hours on it for this kid at least.
Yeah, I think what Teafaerie is getting into, there's an interesting discussion, I think, that's going to emerge over the next few years between the difference between a psychonaut and a patient. And we're seeing this real medicalization of psychedelics going on at the moment, which has got a very positive side to it, and I respect those people that want to work with people that have problems. But I tend to be the opposite. I think psychedelics are for healthy people. And my facilitator was a brown envelope that turned up in the mail. And I think part of the problem is you've got too many, let's call them newbies, who are rushing into the psychedelic world and want to get straight to the top of the pyramid. Michael Pollan being the latest one. And they don't have any networks that they've built up themselves. There's no psychonautical community around them. I really think we've got to build strong internal psychonautical communities to have these experiences within our own groups, our own friends, and not need the facilitators. Unfortunately, the big problem with 5-methoxy-DMT at the moment is the only way you can really get it is through a facilitator. So I'm hoping either the synthetic taps reopen, or we find a good plant extract formula like we have for DMT. Really, I think is going to be the breakthrough, is within the next couple of years you'll see the same kind of online formulas and plant sources for 5-methoxy-DMT. Then we have DMT, and the psychonauts amongst us can continue on their psychonautic path. Demand is on the rise, interest is on the rise, but there's a really interesting conversation. I kind of agree with Teafaerie. Smoking 5-methoxy-DMT in a room with a room full of strangers opens up a lot of energy, and when you experience ego death, so when the ego is rebuilding itself, coming back. The easiest way you can do that is through shared experience and through interactions with other people in the room. I personally almost have to smoke it alone because my interactions when I come out are so powerful. Now this is exactly the opposite of what Ashley would tell you is the correct thing to do. So we have two sides of the coin. Yeah, but I started with no experience.
But it is telepathic talk, though. You know, like if you come back through, like especially if you do it at the same time.
But I think I did have experience on other psychedelics. I think maybe that's part of the key. Is don't be in a hurry. Sorry, yeah. Don't necessarily.
I think we might have a dying mic here. Hold on. Testing.
It's also super directional. It goes right down into the code.
No, it's cutting in and out. Batteries. Hold on, we got batteries.
Yeah, I mean, I just think people should not be in any huge hurry to go rushing towards 5-methoxy-DMT unless it's really calling to you or is in your flow, you know, and definitely have worked with other compounds and be willing to work with the mystery and other things before you dive head deep into the deepest of the mysteries.
Yeah, I think in some ways we can treat the facilitator question or the access question sort of discreetly, a matter of practicalities. But on the other hand, all of the other sort of philosophical questions that Raphael meant or indicated, in a sense, they're all there as well. Because if you're going to be doing this, then what arises to some degree is the fundamental question, why? And maybe you're not going to really have a strong sense of that before you do it. But I guess talks like this and other media can give some sense that in my view, it's really worthwhile waiting and having some, I guess, due diligence so that you can fundamentally trust the person who's going to be helping you to enter that zone as much as you can trust anybody else. And I think it's a really beautiful relationship. The person who's holding that pipe, they're the last eyes that you look into, and you see them dissolve into this crystalline sort of translucency, and they know, and you know. There's this sort of bond of knowing, and that's a beautiful thing to have with another person. And I think we intuit it as a kind of comradeship between all of us who have been dipped in this ocean. And so I would treat it like maybe a good analogy would be if you were set on a Tantra apprenticeship or something like that. Like, who are you going to do that with? Maybe you can't have the bar that high if there are accessibility issues, but certainly it's becoming more accessible, and so I certainly wouldn't rush into just some popular person who's swinging by and maybe doesn't do very much screening, if any screening at all, and then leaves you without any, for example, any horizontal connections, any buddy system, any concern about how you might, or help with how you might integrate this kind of experience, and help practices of remembering in your daily life, and so on. And I think in all of these cases you're dealing with human improvisers. You know, there are no absolute professionals in this by any means. You're dealing with human improvisers who then must be coming from a position of love. And if you've got that, then I think, and a certain amount of skill, then if you want to do it, then jump, do it.
So, in choosing a facilitator or considering undertaking this kind of experience, I think first and foremost, it has to be someone that is facilitating for the right reasons, and not someone that is facilitating because they're dependent on the paycheck. One of the issues that I see, and there's nothing wrong with someone charging money, right, as you said, but if that person is dependent on doing sessions in order to make a living, they're more likely to, let slide certain screening. They're not going to be paying as much attention. They might, skip over the question where it's like, do you have a history of a family mental illness? Or they might skip over the question of like, what other drugs have you taken today? Or what other drugs have you taken this week? So these are the really, really important questions because this molecule does not play very well with others. And it's really important that whoever you're choosing to be a facilitator for you have your best interests in mind and be someone that would be willing to assess the situation and tell you honestly, I don't think you're ready. Or, I don't think that this is appropriate for you right now. Or, I don't feel comfortable facilitating for you right now. I think that sometimes getting that answer can be more powerful than the experience itself. And I want to also say that, while this experience can be one of the most beautiful and transcendent experiences of someone's life, in the top 5 or top 3 for many people, it can also be one of the most terrifying and completely shattering experiences. One of the main reasons I created the 5-MeO DMT forum is to provide a space for people who had very difficult experiences, and like has been said before, they're facilitators doing these sessions without providing appropriate integration or appropriate resources. And so what I've been trying to do is create a space where those people can come and be heard and not feel alone. Because there are a lot of people who have this experience before they're ready, and being exposed to that blistering light. If you're ready for it, it can be the most incredible thing, but without the appropriate preparation or the appropriate integration afterwards, it can be very detrimental. So just to weigh out the benefits, I think it's important to consider the dangers and the concerns that one should have going into it.
Yeah, I want to say something really quickly, and then we have time for one more quick question or one more quick thing, and then we'll do a very short Q&A. Building off what you just said, though, I was literally recently, as in today, thinking about, it's so strange when I hear people describe their hellish experiences with 5. These you do hear some really terrifying experiences that people have had with this substance, and then I was thinking about the way that people describe their the most life-affirming experiences they've had. The words they use sound so similar. The universe began to dissolve. I realized I was just a part of this larger thing, and that everything I thought I wasn't really me. And that's a phrase that could be part of either one of those descriptions. I mean, very, very easily. But one of the things I wanted to talk about really quickly before we do a quick Q&A. Oh, also really quickly, if you guys are comfortable, how many people here have tried 5? I mean, that's a solid number. Wow, amazing. So one of the things I want to talk about is this idea of reactivations, which is something that we hear a lot, but it's not super well defined. I personally have had a few moments of just none driving, thankfully, but sitting around or sitting on a mountain looking out, and after my experience with 5, these moments of unreality, where what I'm looking at suddenly feels very unreal to me. It feels very much like something that is being projected, something that I'm creating. And I think that's what people are describing when they're describing reactivations. These moments of awareness of that sense of unrealness of what's around us. And so is this something that you've experienced? Is this something that you are concerned about or happy for, either one or the other? The old joke about flashbacks, it's it's cheaper than buying the acid, right? And so just thoughts on that really quickly, and then we'll try to do a couple quick questions, but I'm going to hang around for a few minutes after, and so if you don't get your question in, I'm sure people will hang around as well.
I guess for me it hasn't happened in sleep or consciously, but on other psychedelics I have had 5-methoxy DMT experiences where I would have never been able to have them before. DMT, if I smoke enough DMT, I just go full 5-MeO, and then when I return to my body, there's visual stuff going on around me that makes me realise that I actually smoked DMT at that time, 5-MeO, and DMT had never put a new done. So I think once those neuronic pathways get set, your brain can get back to that state. That was the idea of meditation and yoga and lots of these things. So once the brain's established that pathway, it can return to it.
Yeah, I think that real is a word that we made up in here to mean this. And it's the consistent one. When you run the tape backwards, you get good physics. I'm a wishy-washy simulationist. I'd bet $100 but not $1,000. But if you like your metaphors plausible, right? It's probably a lot more of them. But it doesn't bother me. Like, all religions are essentially simulationists. Like, you know, the Eastern versions, this is Maya, this is an illusion in some sense. And, like, the Levantine religions is there is a realer reality from which this one was created. And we're hoping to get back to that realer reality. So they're all essentially simulationists in the sense that this thing is a construct. It doesn't say anything about the constructors. It's not Sky Santa. It could be planet-sized quantum computers working together. We can't tell. But I wanted to pop back to Sebastian's real quick. My best experiences have been one-on-one with a lover. And Teafaerie always has to say, don't pass out without a sitter. But there's a really beautiful thing that can happen. And I have a, not unique but not canon experience about manifestation where I come up over the flatland of the multiverse and come back into the version in which. Or I'm wrong. You can only go entropy-ward and you can only go into consecutive frames, but there's a lot of versions in which, if it's a simulation, but if there's a lot of versions in which what you want is real close by. And the rocking out with a lover is the best thing that's ever happened to me. Like, it just shit came true. So that's not canon, that's my weird experience.
As far as reactivations go, just kind of stepping back from a little bit more of a physical sense, 5-MeO DMT and NN-DMT are naturally occurring neurotransmitters in our body, and so once
is that, even with LSD flashbacks, these are potentially states of mind that were too overwhelming in the moment. And then when the nervous system feels that it's safe enough to process that again, it brings those things back and returns the individual right back into the same state of consciousness.
No worries. It's interesting that there's a lot of fear around reactivations, and yet in some sense they're just a bonus. They're the gift that keeps giving, and the fear is worth interrogating, because it seems to me that maybe beyond fears about going insane or dying or being caught in hell states, there's the fear of being enlightened. There's the fear of being realized. These words, I'm not pretending I fundamentally know what they mean, but they stand again for that X that sort of maybe is the transcendental object at the end of our desires. And if reactivations are connecting you back to what you were seeking, if they are this mode of connection, this mode of remembering, it's as if they are a mode of undomesticated remembering. So it's not just this ordinary consciousness kind of talk that, for example, I'm in now about 5. This is, you want to remember? This is what it was. I'm going to give you 10%, or I'm going to give you 15% or 1%. Just a personal level, my strongest reactivation was when I reached the top of a sand dune. It was a very large sand dune. I really hammered it to get to the top, and I think the intensity of bodily activation and the intensity of my heart, it just brought it there to me, and it brought the fear. Oh gosh, am I gonna, be having my infinite orgasm here on the top of the sand dune? And what rather happened was that I was able to spend time in this blend of quote unquote ordinary consciousness and that. And to me, a lot of the work and a lot of the processing happened then. It was really a gift. So I think activations are to be, to the degree that they're not reactivation of a hell state, then activations are a gift.
I'm calling it right now. Infinite Orgasm on Top of a Sand Dune is my new band name. Patent pending. No one gets it. Yeah, I think it's question time. I'm not quite sure how much time we have left because I took my glasses off and I'm functionally blind, but it was getting a little dark in here. But let's, oh, perfect. So cool, yeah. We have 30 more minutes?
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Counterindications between SSRIs and 5.
Yep.
Yes, is the answer. So, this is one I haven't done a lot of research on personally. I'm not...
SSRIs, MAOIs.
So SSRIs, MAOIs... Yeah, sorry.
SSRIs, MAOIs, depressants. You know, it shouldn't be mixed with anything that would, you know, cause you to lose consciousness or, you know, mess with your serotonin system.
There's also reports of people having really rapid heart rate with recent use of pharmaceutical amphetamines.
Yes.
So if you've been taking Adderall, Ritalin, any of these families of ADHD drugs, I'm not saying don't take 5, but if you have a weak heart and you're on pharmaceutical amphetamines and you smoke 5, I could definitely see there being like real problems. So.
Even something like caffeine. Even
Oh yeah,
something like caffeine, you know.
Stimulants. It's kind of a your heart gets going. I think a lot of that is psychological. The universe is unmaking itself, and you're part of this, and it's like it would be surprising if your heart rate was not elevated while the universe is unglued. So.
People are probably not going to like this, but the bufo-toad venom is actually more dangerous than the synthetic. It does have heart toxins, and I think you're more likely to have a heart attack or have problems on the toad venom than you are on the synthetic. And there certainly seem to be more cases of people having had issues on the toad venom than on the synthetic.
I would echo that.
It is possible to boof it, by which I mean, you know, put a little bit in water and suck it up in a syringe and put it up in your wahoo. 7 for me is like a perfect meditation dose for 45 minutes because the part of the gut that it breaks down is up higher than the system than that. You know, 15's fine for 45 minutes. 25 you'll have to pass out without a sitter. But don't try to bufo because that's different chemicals that you do not want to put up there. In fact, it has to be smoked and burned hard enough.
Any other questions? Next? If not, oh, yeah.
Y'all mentioned surrendering and like allowing yourself into these experiences, and it makes me think of all the efforts that we might make under those conditions to reassert some part of ourselves, to seize the means of production of this universal unraveling. It's like we want to create it instead of letting it be discovered. So how do you, I mean, I guess this is like the question of how do you feel about surrendering? How, I just want to talk about that concept a little bit because it feels a little bit like the question of the apprentice asking the Buddha, like, how do I reach? But in a way, I think surrendering is such an unspoken concept without words really able to define, and I'd like to hear what your thoughts are.
So let me say something real quick, and then we'll. I was going to try not to answer any of the questions, but this one I really want to answer. Yeah. Oh, sorry. So the question was around the idea of surrender and how we feel around this idea, and the importance of deconstructing that idea. If I'm badly paraphrasing, I apologize, but. This is one of the situations where the map is not the mountain, the map cannot be the mountain, so I think surrender is an approximation of what we're trying to say. It might not mean to me what it means to you. I think one of the values of this drug is that at a sufficient dose, in a proper setting, the choice you made was to light the lighter, and once the drug is in your brain, the choice has been made at that point. The surrendering is part of the unraveling, it's part of the process, it's part of the drug. It's not actually something that you're choosing to do. The choice was to smoke the drug. And now the drug has been smoked, and the surrendering is happening as part of that experience. At least that was my experience, but you're disagreeing, I can see.
Yeah, I would have to say I disagree with that. The reason being the cases, the very rare cases I have seen where people have had really traumatic experiences, it seems to be that they can't let go. Because what you're experiencing is the destruction of your ego. And that's terrifying for your ego. So those of us that have powerful egos can hesitate at the brink of that, and that's where dosage can be very important. But that's the advice I give to most people, is that certainly my first experience, I felt like my entire life had come to that moment, and that if I trusted in the universe and trusted in the process and just really let go, that I would be fine. But if you can't do that, that's when people have the problems. So I think there is a conscious choice that can go on within the process. I don't know how you come about making that choice or not making that choice. I used to run a bungee jumping operation for a number of years. And it'd be interesting, like, men would come out to the bridge talking a lot about how they'd want to jump, and then they'd get tied up and they would realise they're on the edge of the bridge, and sometimes they wouldn't be able to jump at all, you know. And I'd have guys be like, "Oh, I'll give you $100 if you push me." And I'm like, "No, I'm not going to push you because I'm stealing from your experience." So it's sort of something that you have to go through yourself to learn how to let go. But as a facilitator, like, I'm not a facilitator who ever charges, but I've definitely given it to a lot of people. And there's only been a couple of times where people have had bad experiences, and on those cases, both of those times, I didn't think they were suitable candidates, but I was convinced by other people, and I was sort of, well, who am I to make the decision? I'm not the shaman, you know, I'm just the guy who's here. And so there's a part of you, if you do actually have the opportunity to start giving it to other people, follow your own instincts on things like that as well. So it's a strange, fine line.
Yeah, the trouble I've seen with it mostly is people who think they're dying and can't get behind it. And I always tell them, you know, you're going to be the guy on the balcony. Like, in my universe, you're going to pop up like a cork, and I'm not going to have to explain this to your mama. And if you feel like you're dying, just let that happen. I promise you, there's a feather bed on the other side of it, and you're going to pop up like a cork. And if people can remember that. The other thing that happens is, like, you ever tried to... I used to only have one of those bikes that you pedal backwards to stop it, and I suddenly had a handbrake bike, and I was going downhill, and I was pedaling backwards, and nothing was happening, and I was going faster and faster. It was fine if I could just go down the hill, but the fact that you can't make it stop is terrifying, right? It's okay that you can't make it stop. Like I said, it's a feather bed on the other side.
Is it? Okay. So I think that was beautifully said. I don't have much more to add in terms of the idea of surrender, but I wanted to maybe zoom out a little bit and provide a philosophical concept that maybe would kind of be a conversational piece for what you're presenting. And this is a theoretical, philosophical idea, but if we were to consider that, you know, we're all one being experiencing itself, and over the course of evolution us have progressively found increasing ways of connecting to itself in the purest way. And suddenly, you know, at this point in our evolution, this molecule has entered into human awareness. And this is, you know, the first documented amount of human beings experiencing this concentration of 5-MeO-DMT in this great number. While there's, you know, presence of 5-MeO-DMT in certain snuffs, it's nowhere near the amount of that we're finding in the toad venom or, you know, access to synthetic 5-MeO-DMT. So in terms of surrender, sometimes I wonder, you know, when we have this experience where the idea of the self that, you know, this self that is talking right now, when that is removed, and suddenly the illusion is shattered, and it's surrendering to what we really are, and it's surrendering to that desire to ultimately connect with the divine source of all that is. And so I think as you were talking about surrender, I was thinking about this idea that perhaps part of the surrender is letting go of our idea of the character, as Teafaerie often refers to it. And we can just take off the mask and surrender to what we really are. And surrender to the game of what this is.
Just want to throw a couple of ideas in along those lines, and maybe they connect a little bit with both what James and Raphael were saying there. I too think that it's not just the drug that determines the surrender, and surrender is a word that hides some fairly fundamental issues. At the base of surrender, in my estimation, is freedom. If there is a kind of a choice making that happens there. And if it's true that there's a choice making that happens there in the heart of the experience that co-determines what actually flowers, then what that tells me is that choice here is not just sort of sitting on the side of the ego outside of reality. Choice/freedom is as fundamental to the isness that is being revealed as is love, you know. And so the depth of your surrender is the depth of your capacity to say yes to freedom. And to my mind, that's not just a subjective thing that you do. It's a revealing of the fundamental freedom that is. Maybe one more thing also, which is, I think there's maybe some philosophical division, or maybe it's just a sort of elective affinity, different psychologies go in different directions, but some people come to the conclusion from a practice like 5, or a practice like Vipassana, or a practice of various other kinds of mysticism, that surrender is, because it's the key for this revelation, that is the only thing you then have to do. My sense is that this, I'll just use the word reality, this reality has many facets, many faces, and surrender is a mode of opening to the totality, but it's not necessarily the primary mode for living out your version of the reality. And that involves, for example, assertiveness, which is perhaps another dimension. So to that degree, I think the integrative process is a bit complicated because you can't just repeat what you were doing. You have to sort of bring in other modes as well.
I was just going to say in relation to that, Alexander Shulgin, Sasha Shulgin, created a scale for grading psychedelics, and he had the +1, the +2, the 1, the 2, the 3, and then he had his ultimate experience was a +4, and in a +4 experience, it's a once in a lifetime experience, and everything actually changes with that experience. When I first had my 5-methoxy, my first 5-MeO DMT experience, and then I kept experimenting with it, and I kept going back to the same place, I was like, oh, well, how can this be a +4 if I keep having the same experience? But I realized it was the very first experience that everything changed. I went from being an atheist, like Ashley, to believing that I'd had a mystical experience. You're not going to experience that change every time you smoke 5-MeO DMT. But when you have that real +4 breakthrough, lots of other things change, and they can have radical effect in your own reality life. And if you look through Pikal and Tikal, there's 2 compounds in Pikal that Sasha gives the +4, and then in Tikal, 5-MeO DMT is the only one that actually gets the +4. And Tikal was the latter book, so I would suspect that he wouldn't have included the ones in Pikal. And I've never actually got to ask him about his experience and why, above all the other experiences, he ranked it so uniquely. But I think that's one thing you can keep coming back to about 5-methoxy DMT, is it's so unique in its own classification.
So George, we'll take your question next. I think that's going to be the last one, unfortunately. I'm not sure where we're at, but I just want to say if it is a choice, if surrender is a choice, and if my ego can learn to surrender, then anyone's can. And so I did just want to put that out there because it's very, very true. Yeah, George.
I have a
taken any of these compounds. Long time acid tripper though, and I'm sort of interested. You know, getting old now. I had an opportunity to try plain old DMT in Portland recently, and I wasn't ready. I knew I wasn't ready. But I'm very interested in all of this, and especially because my daughter, she developed alcoholism. And I sent her to the Ibogaine clinic in Tijuana. And there they gave her Ibogaine first, and then 3 ayahuasca sessions, and finally the last one was smoking toad venom. She had a big trauma when her mother died at age 16, and on the toad venom she encountered her mother in the universe, and got just tremendous relief from her trauma of being orphaned, or half orphaned at 16. So none of you have said anything about encountering other entities out there in the methoxy space. But regular DMT, we hear that all the time, you know, the machine helps it. And so can you address that? I mean, how do people on toad encounter other entities, especially loved ones?
So really quickly, my experience in the core of the experience was that pure white light. There was no there because it was all there. Is the best I can do. But I will say that as I was coming out of that core experience and I was aware of the universe around me again, and there was these large boulders all around me, for a drug that it does not have a reputation of being particularly visually interesting for a lot of people, the things I was seeing on these boulders, for the first time in my life, I understood what would inspire someone to spend a lifetime carving at a boulder to like show this thing that they had seen. Like I was seeing these skulls and wings and patterns on the boulders that if I'd had a rock, I would have started carving right then. But in the core of the experience, for me at least, there was nothing else other than everything. And having read a lot on Five Hive and a lot on Iroid, I think the general experience is not of seeing entities, it's of the emptiness.
The way I kind of conceptualize it is that this is, again, my only perception, my perspective, but, you know, we're kind of here in this material vibrating at slow light vibrating here, and what I think of is that when we smoke NN-DMT, it's like we're bumping up into this more like archetypical beings of form, and then we go beyond that, then we're going to formless space. And again, and similar to Mitchell, when I've gone deep into 5 space, I don't see visions, but one of the things that is potent and maybe isn't in the necessary, you're seeing visions of content, but you're feeling. So, you know, I don't know if your daughter actually saw her mother or she felt her mother, because I think of it as much more of a emotion-based and somatic-based medicine than it is a cognitive or visual medicine. So, and from all the people that I've interacted with that have done this medicine, it tends to be much more from that perspective than they see actual things.
I actually had an experience that completely was outside of my own framework, in which I encountered a dead friend, and she actually gave a clear message to somebody else who was in the room. So when I came out of the experience, my other friend said that there'd been somebody in the room and gave a message to me that could have really only come from her. And that doesn't fit within my own framework. So I felt like I was with her in another place, walking on like a plane of stars, and that we were together, but we weren't really talking, we were just like, and I hadn't actually thought of her in some time, and she had died on the other side of the world a number of years earlier. So we had this sort of experience of walking together. And then when I came to on the couch, I was very calm. And my friend, who was an older woman who was in the room, who's quite psychic, and she was waiting to smoke it. She hadn't smoked anything. And she was in tears. And she was like, oh, there was this woman in the room, she was young, she was really beautiful. She wanted to tell you she was sorry she never got a chance to say goodbye. And she had died of a brain embolism. So whether I projected that into the room and my friend felt that, I tend to believe that all of our lives are a wave, and we are informing the quantum vacuum with our living experience. So in that, every life and every living experience is contained in the Akashic record, and if two waves entangle, they can experience each other. I don't really believe in past lives as much as I believe all the lives are in there, and we can actually experience any past life. You know what I mean? So I think it's totally feasible. It doesn't even fit within my own framework.
But at least there's another example of encountering another personality in the five state.
Okay. So there's two things about it. One is, for me, all of the times I've ever done it are connected from the back, kind of like the Whippet Loop, but magically. And so there's a sense in which my lover that we were super, super intermeshed in it. I'll re-experience a piece of that, which is seductive. And I've also, again, on the liminal, in the edge, coming in and going out. The center's always the center. I say the center of Indian's always different, center of 5 is always the same, right? But liminally, on the way in and out. And some people will experience, especially I think with Toad, if they have some kind of like entity attachment, like you would consider with ayahuasca, for instance, they'll experience that thing inside of themselves coming out. So that would be the other entity experience I've seen people report.
I think we are officially out of time. Correct? Yes? No?
7:45.
Yeah. So we're out of time. Thank you guys so much for coming. I super appreciate it. We're all very findable on the internet if you have any questions. You can Google any one of us and track us down. So thank you.